My name is Connie Stoker. I'm 31 years old, and I used to believe that if you drove carefully enough, followed the rules, and stayed in your lane, life would do the same for you. That illusion ended on a cold Tuesday evening, somewhere along I-270. I work as a project estimator for a commercial roofing company in Columbus, Ohio. My job isn't glamorous, but it's steady. I spend most of my days driving from site to site, climbing ladders, walking rooftops, measuring damage, calculating costs. It's repetitive, sometimes exhausting, but it's predictable. And I've always liked predictable. Predictable means safe. Predictable means nothing blindsides you. That day had already drained me. I'd spent hours on top of a strip mall in Westerville, rechecking measurements that refused to line up, my fingers numb from the cold wind cutting across the roof. By the time I packed up, my shoulders ached and my head throbbed. All I wanted was to get home, take off my boots, and disappear into silence for a few hours. I texted my boyfriend, Daniel. "Leaving now. Long day. Need anything?" He replied, "No, just come home." Simple. Grounding. The kind of message that makes you feel like something steady is waiting for you at the end of the day. Traffic on the highway was typical for that hour, dense but moving. I settled into the middle lane, letting the rhythm of brake lights and engine hum lull me into that familiar autopilot. My mind drifted. Dinner, a hot shower, maybe falling asleep on the couch with the TV still on. And then everything snapped. A silver Nissan Altima surged up on my left, weaving through traffic with that aggressive, impatient energy you can feel even before something goes wrong. I noticed it because you always notice those drivers, the ones who treat the road like a game they need to win. He sped past a couple of cars, then cut sharply into my lane just a few car lengths ahead of me. No signal, no hesitation, just control. Before I could even process the move, his brake lights flared. Bright, sudden, absolute. It wasn't a slowdown. It wasn't defensive driving. It was a trap. My foot slammed onto the brake instinctively. The car shuddered, tires screaming, the pedal vibrating violently under my foot as the ABS kicked in. But there wasn't enough space. There had never been enough space. The impact hit like a blunt force jolt, snapping my body forward against the seatbelt. It locked hard across my chest, stealing the air from my lungs. My head didn't whip forward enough to trigger the airbag, but the force was enough to make everything inside me feel displaced, like the world had shifted half an inch out of alignment. For a second, everything went strangely quiet. Not truly quiet. The engine was still running, cars still passing, but inside me, there was this hollow pause, like my brain refused to catch up to what had just happened. Then reality rushed back in. I turned off the radio because the voice talking about something completely unrelated felt almost offensive in that moment. My hands trembled as I reached for the hazard lights. My breath came unevenly. I stepped out of the car, legs unsteady, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was echoing in my ears. The driver of the Altima was already out, and already acting. He grabbed the back of his neck with both hands the second his feet hit the pavement. Not cautiously, not like someone testing an injury. It was immediate, dramatic. His face twisted in pain as he staggered slightly, tilting his head in a way that looked exaggerated, almost rehearsed. "Hey," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Are you okay? I'm so sorry. You stopped really fast." "My neck," he cut in sharply. "I can't move my neck. What were you doing? You were flying." Flying. The word didn't match reality. Traffic had been moving at barely 50. "I wasn't," I started, but he was already shaking his head, wincing as if the motion hurt him, even though he'd just turned it freely seconds before. Something about it felt wrong. Not just unfortunate, not just stressful, wrong. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911 with practiced urgency. "Yeah, I've been rear-ended," he said, his voice strained but controlled. "She was going at least 70. My neck, my back. I think I need an ambulance." 70. The number hung in the air like a lie too big to ignore. I made my own call, giving the operator the location, describing both vehicles, keeping my tone calm, even as my thoughts spiraled. I said no one appeared seriously injured, because from what I could see, no one was. But the story was already slipping out of my control. We stood there on the shoulder, cars rushing past, wind whipping against us. He paced slowly, stopping every few steps to clutch his neck, leaning against his car like he might collapse. It was convincing, if you didn't look too closely, if you didn't notice the timing, if you didn't notice the way his eyes flicked toward me, measuring, watching. And then the witness appeared. A man in a gray hoodie approached from behind, walking quickly but not hurried, like he'd been heading this way all along. "I saw everything," he said, inserting himself into the space between us with quiet confidence. "You were right behind him the whole time." I stared at him, confused, because I hadn't seen him. Not in my mirrors, not before the impact. "I was just back there," he added, nodding toward the road. "You were too close, it was bound to happen." The words felt rehearsed. Even more unsettling was the way he turned to the driver, Dominic, I would later learn, and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll back you up." Back you up. The phrase settled into my chest like a stone. Not, "I'll tell them what I saw." Not, "I'll be honest." Back you up. Police arrived soon after. Statements were taken. Dominic repeated his version with unwavering certainty, still clutching his neck, still playing his role. The witness, Vince, confirmed every detail. And me? I stood there, trying to piece together a version of events that suddenly felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. The officer was polite but matter-of-fact. "Rear-end collisions usually fall on the trailing driver," he said, "unless there's evidence suggesting otherwise." Evidence. I nodded, even though something inside me tightened, because I didn't have any, or at least, I hadn't thought about it yet. By the time Dominic was loaded into the ambulance, secured in a neck brace like a scene out of a movie, I felt like I was watching something unfold that I couldn't stop. My car was damaged, my record was on the line, and somehow, I had already been cast as the one at fault. That night, I sat on the couch in my apartment, a bag of frozen peas pressed against my shoulder where the seatbelt had bruised me. Daniel sat beside me, asking questions, trying to make sense of it, but my answers were distant. Because my mind kept replaying it, the cut-in, the instant break, the performance, the witness, over and over again, like a loop I couldn't escape. It didn't feel random. It didn't feel like an accident. It felt orchestrated. And then, sometime after midnight, as I stared at the ceiling with exhaustion pulling at my body and something colder settling in my chest, I remembered something I hadn't thought about all day. The Dashcam. A small, forgettable device mounted to my windshield months ago after Daniel insisted, after weeks of him sending me videos, warning me about scams, telling me I was on the road too much not to have one. I sat up slowly, my pulse quickening. Because if it had been recording, then everything I thought I'd lost, my credibility, my record, my peace, might still be there, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The Altima cutting in, the brake lights flaring, the impact. But it wasn't just the crash anymore. It was the way Dominic grabbed his neck before he even looked at the damage. The way Vince appeared out of nowhere and spoke like he had a script memorized. And the worst part? The quiet certainty that I was about to pay for something I didn't do. By morning, That certainty had turned into urgency. I called the tow yard the second they opened. My voice sounded steadier than I felt as I asked if my car was accessible. The woman on the phone gave me directions, her tone flat, like this was just another routine question in a long list of accidents she handled every day. But for me, it didn't feel routine. It felt like everything hinged on what I was about to find. I took an Uber there, barely noticing the route. My hands rested in my lap, fingers twisting together, my mind racing ahead to possibilities I was almost afraid to hope for. What if the camera didn't catch it? What if it malfunctioned? What if it only recorded after the impact? The questions tightened around my chest the entire ride. When I finally saw my car sitting in the lot, something inside me dropped. The front end looked worse in daylight, hood crumpled, bumper hanging unevenly, fluid stains marking the ground beneath it. It didn't look like something that belonged to me anymore. It looked like evidence. I forced myself to focus. The windshield was intact, and there it was, that small black camera, still mounted exactly where Daniel had insisted we put it months ago. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it, like it was the only thing in the world that could speak for me. I climbed into the driver's seat, ignoring the faint smell of coolant and bent metal, and reached up with slightly trembling fingers. The camera was cold to the touch, still solid, still there. I pressed the release. The micro SD card slid out into my hand. Such a tiny thing, and yet, somehow, it felt heavier than anything I'd held in days. Back at work, I didn't go to my desk. I went straight to the break room, pulled out my laptop, and plugged in the card with the adapter I kept buried in my bag. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it. The files loaded. Rows of timestamps. Short clips. I clicked the one that matched the time of the accident. For a second, nothing happened. Then the video began. I watched it once, then again, and then a third time, slower. Each time, the truth became clearer. The Altima appeared on the left side of the frame, exactly as I remembered, but now without the distortion of shock. It sped up aggressively, weaving past other cars, then cut sharply into my lane. No signal, no hesitation, no doubt. It wasn't careless. It was deliberate. 2 seconds passed. 2 seconds. And then the brake lights came on. Solid, immediate, unnecessary. There was nothing in front of him, no obstacle, no traffic slowing, just open road stretching ahead. He didn't react. He executed. I felt my stomach twist as I watched my own car in the frame, my hood dipping as I hit the brakes, the slight shake before the impact. It all happened exactly as I remembered, but now I could see what I couldn't in the moment. The setup, the intention, the trap closing. The video continued past the crash, capturing the aftermath, and that's when everything shifted. About 8 seconds after both cars came to a stop on the shoulder, another vehicle entered the frame from behind. A dark blue Chevy Malibu. It pulled over at a distance, not too close, not too far. Calculated. A man stepped out. Vince. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath catching. Because he hadn't walked up randomly. He had arrived. From a car. From behind. I scrubbed back through the footage, my fingers moving faster now, adrenaline replacing the fear. 2 minutes before the collision, there it was. The same blue Malibu, trailing behind the Altima, keeping pace, maintaining distance, moving like it was part of the same rhythm. Not coincidence, coordination. My chest tightened as the realization settled in, heavy and undeniable. They weren't strangers. They were working together. Dominic was the one who caused the crash. Vince was the one who made sure the story stuck. The witness, the backup, the lie that made everything look real. I sat back in the chair, staring at the screen as a strange mix of emotions surged through me. Relief, Anger, disbelief, and beneath all of it, something colder. Because this hadn't just been bad luck. This had been planned. They had chosen a target. They had executed a routine. And if it had worked, I would have been the one paying for it. I saved the footage immediately. Then I saved it again. Laptop, USB drive, email, every possible place I could think of. I wasn't taking any chances. My hands were steadier now, my thoughts sharper. For the first time since the accident, I felt something shift. Not fear. Control. I picked up my phone and called the insurance adjuster back. She answered with the same professional tone as before, already prepared to walk me through rising rates, liability, consequences. "I have dashcam footage," I said. There was a pause, a real one this time. "Can you send that to me?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Check your email in 5 minutes." I sent everything, the full clip, unedited, from before the lane change through the aftermath. I added a short explanation outlining exactly what I had seen, what the footage showed, the deliberate cut-in, the brake slam, the witness arriving from a trailing vehicle. Then I waited. Those 2 hours felt longer than the entire night before. When my phone finally rang, I answered immediately. Her tone had changed, subtly, but unmistakably. "Ms. Stoker," she said, slower this time, "we're going to need to escalate this to our Special Investigations Unit." I closed my eyes, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Because in that moment, everything shifted. I wasn't the one being investigated anymore. They were. The next few days didn't feel real. Everything moved faster than I expected, but at the same time, every hour stretched with this quiet tension, like I was waiting for something to snap back the other way. Because part of me still didn't trust it. Part of me kept thinking, what if it's not enough? What if they twist it? What if somehow I still lose? But the call came sooner than I thought. 2 days later, I was standing in a parking lot outside a job site, staring at a roof I was supposed to be measuring, when my phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered. "Miss Stoker, this is Detective Wes Carter with the County Fraud Unit." My chest tightened. Fraud unit. Not traffic, not insurance. Fraud. "I've reviewed the footage you provided," he continued, his tone calm, precise. "We'd like you to come in and give a formal statement." There was no doubt in his voice, no hesitation, and that's when I knew. This wasn't going away quietly. At the station, everything felt controlled, different from the chaos of the roadside. Clean lines, fluorescent lighting, people who weren't guessing, they were building something, a case. Detective Carter had already watched the footage, more than once. He played it again on his monitor while I sat across from him, my hands folded tightly in my lap. This time, I didn't feel panic watching it. I felt anger, cold, focused. "See that?" he said, pausing the frame right as the Altima cut in front of me. "That's not a merge. That's positioning." He let it play. Brake lights, impact. Then he paused again, right when the Malibu entered the frame. "And that," he said quietly, "is your witness. Not a witness, your witness. Like it belonged to the setup, to them." I swallowed hard. "So, this was planned?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He leaned back slightly, studying me. "This is what we call a staged collision," he said. "And based on what we're seeing, it's not their first." Something inside me went still. Because suddenly, it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about how many times this had worked before. He explained it in a way that felt almost clinical, like he'd said it too many times to count. There's always a driver, the one who causes the crash. There's a witness, the one who makes sure the story sticks. Sometimes there are more, clinics, lawyers, people who know how to turn a minor accident into a major payout. A system, not chaos, a system that almost swallowed me whole. "We've been tracking a pattern," he added. "Rear-end collisions, similar claims, always with a witness, but we've never had clear coordination on camera before." He looked at me then. "What you brought in? This is the cleanest evidence we've had in over a year." I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me felt validated. Another part felt sick. Because if my camera hadn't caught it, then I would have just been another name in that pattern, another person paying for someone else's lie. A week passed, then another, and just when I started to settle into the uneasy waiting, my phone rang again. Detective Carter. "We've made arrests," he said. Just like that, no build-up, no warning. "Dominic Hayes and Vincent Cole were taken into custody this morning." I closed my eyes. A strange wave of relief hit me, but it wasn't clean. It wasn't simple. Because relief doesn't erase what almost happened. "They're being charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy, and filing false statements," he continued. "We also recovered communications between them." Communications, text messages, proof. "They were coordinating," he said. "Timing, positioning, even what injuries to claim." A hollow laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Of course they were. "Miss Stoker," he added, his voice softer now, "you did everything right." Did everything right. The words landed heavier than I expected. Because for days, I had felt like I'd done something wrong just by being there, by hitting his car, by not seeing it coming. But now I understood. I hadn't failed. I had been targeted. A few days later, my insurance company called. Same number, same office, but a completely different conversation. "Your claim has been cleared," the adjuster said. "No fault assigned to you. Your rates will remain unchanged, and the accident will be removed from your record." I leaned back against the wall, sliding down slowly until I was sitting on the floor. It was over. Just like that. Something that had threatened to unravel years of my life, undone. Not by luck, by proof. My car was still damaged. The estimate came in just under $5,000. Insurance covered it, and they told me they'd be going after Dominic for reimbursement. But honestly, that part barely registered. Because the real damage had never been the car. It had been the fear, the uncertainty, the quiet realization of how easily everything could have gone the other way. Daniel hugged me that night like he didn't want to let go. "I told you that camera mattered," he whispered against my hair. I nodded, because he had, and I almost hadn't listened. Weeks later, life started to settle again. Work, traffic, routine. But something had changed. Every time I got behind the wheel, I noticed more. Cars that moved too aggressively, drivers who watched a little too closely, moments that felt off. And sometimes, late at night, when everything was quiet, I thought about the ones who didn't have a camera, the ones who didn't have proof, the ones who paid for something they didn't do. Because Dominic and Vince hadn't just tried this once, they had done it before. And somewhere out there were people still living with the consequences. That's the part that stays with me, not the crash, not even the fear, but the truth. That one small decision, something as simple as installing a camera you barely think about, can be the difference between losing everything and exposing the people who thought they could take it from you.